This is Gippsland FM, your community connection. I'm just checking that this is working. Okay, I think we've got the technology sorted out. It is a beautiful sunny day out there today, and we've got with us, before we do that, I've got to introduce the show, which is Business, Wealth and Mental Health, and it's a show that explores how thriving businesses, wise financial advice and peaceful relationships are better for your mental health. And today I have with me Michael Fozard. Michael, pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me in.
It's a pleasure. Now, in the show, starting off the show beforehand, it was I just got a message coming in, and I'm going to ignore that, and because I think we're working very fine. We were talking about resilience, and from your background, you've done quite a few things. You're not originally from Gippsland, but you have spent a lot of time in Gippsland.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your history and what drew you there, and a bit about the resilience. What made you keep going, keep moving?
Well, I suppose my first experience in anything to do with community type activity and I suppose getting the community to respond to its own needs and I suppose difficulties was I started in my early 20s as what they call an honorary probationary officer in Melbourne, in Blackburn, where I would look after children that would go through the children's court and be then allocated to a probation officer or an honorary probationary officer, and we would then try and look at how we could then support them and get them to a position where they would not reoffend again and would become normal people within our community without necessarily doing anything from a criminal perspective.
So is there any advice that you would give the community now? Because apparently there's a lot of, apparently there is some youth issues with crime and that. Yeah. Is there anything how would you deal with that back in the day?
I suppose the real thing that I found back in those days, and we're now talking the mid-70s to the early 80s, was I suppose the involvement of the community. What the system that I was involved in is we tried to connect the person, the offender, with the community and with people within the community that would then support them plus their families. Because in a lot of situations where a young person offended was that they come from a fairly dysfunctional family. And so therefore, as a result of that, it was a matter of trying to give them an appreciation, plus their parents, ideas and thoughts of really the things that are necessary for the child to be looking at and for the child hopefully to comprehend and develop some values and some standards through other people that would come in from outside their family unit.
I think that principle, what you're talking about, is quite common today as well. I mean, that principle is the same. A lot of people that don't quite fit into society and break the rules don't have that strong family background. Right. Do you think there could be more to be done about in the community involvement? Because I know you're very much about bringing community together.
I think the community is our strength, and we need for people, whether they be single parents, grandparents, whatever, they need to be able to be willing to actually give to others and to assist others in their dilemma. Now, I'm involved now in an organisation where we do a lot of social support for individuals that have issues, have frustrations, and have certain, I suppose, approaches where it can put them in front of the law. And we've got to try and get through to them that there are people there that are willing to support them. And that's the real issue. You can speak to some of these people now, younger people, even into their mid-20s, and some of them don't see anything in life. They don't see a positive outlook for their life. They're looking, hope. Yeah, they have no hope. Yeah. Or they have little hope. Yeah. Not necessarily no hope, but they have little. And as a result of that, I've had numerous ones that will say to me, well, I've got nothing. I've got no money. What are they in my life? And then you've got to try and sort of say to them, well, there is more. You can do more, but for them to do more, they need that community support. To my way of thinking, and I know there's a lot of people that don't have it, family support is a great thing. Friends support is a great thing. Yeah. Community support is a great thing, but we've got to be able to get them, that is all those groups of people, to be able to give to the people that need it.
It's interesting you mentioned that family support, because I've also been talking with a number of people in the community, and there's some people that I've talked to, some parents in particular, and I'm not going to name the person, but the person that I spoke to was talking about, and he was a nice gentleman, but he wouldn't have come from a high-end socioeconomic background. But he was talking about his kids, and we're talking about these things to engage kids, and he goes, I want that for my children. He goes, because when I was growing up, all my stepdad said to me was I was a useless piece of, and he used a 4-letter word.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how I think there's a lot of people out there that, as parents, that they want that kind of thing. And they want that guidance to help them because they didn't have it. Do we need more of that out there to help those people?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I suppose what I see, I actually got involved in a program which is called a mentoring program, where we would get young people from the high school, predominantly in their year 10, 9 type thing, and we would go in there. Now, they've done nothing wrong, the child. We had to get the consent of the parent and the consent of the child for us to go in there and just talk to them, just talk about issues that may be confronting them. Because a lot of children find it difficult at sometimes to communicate with their parents. They may find it difficult to communicate with their teachers. They might find it difficult to communicate or to get involved with the police. So having an independent person was one way of addressing these particular children and their issues that they were confronting in that very impressionable type age time. So if at any time a person or a parent or whoever it may be has something where they feel as though they look for a service out there. It's amazing what services we've got out there. Look, they are stretched. There's no getting away from it. They're finding it very difficult to meet the demand, but just put your hand out. See what you can find.
In that, you mentioned about communication with parents and communication. And I'm not just going to constrain this to child and parent relations, but I'm talking about all communication. How much of that is when we look at it and we see someone in trouble or we're having an issue communicating, that we probably need to be listening more and asking questions as opposed to telling people and speaking first?
Yeah, I would definitely. Listening and any communication is vital. Always sitting there and trying to talk, saying that you know everything. No, you won't get there. You've got to be able to listen to what the person is telling you. So if it's a young person that may be, 10 or 11, 12, up to an older person into their 20s and 30s. And I'm also dealing with people that are in their 50s and 60s that have still got these sort of difficulties, even in understanding their own life and understanding their own purpose. And I think that the way I look at it, it is amazing as a human being how strong our brain is, how capable we've got, if only given the right tools to be able to handle what we can do. And we can achieve it. Look, there are some people that have difficulties, I agree, but in general terms, we can achieve an incredible amount if only we put our mind to it. So I sort of feel as though if you can reach out, it is important that you do that. And as I said before, I've dealt with parents that are reaching out and sort of saying, well, can you help us? The other issue you've got, especially in our society today, is that I'm dealing with people with disabilities. It can be autism, it can be physical, mental disabilities, psychological disabilities, etc., etc. But in a lot of cases, all these people are looking for is someone to talk to them, someone to understand them, but not necessarily dictate to them, not necessarily tell them what they should be doing or not doing. So I think that is the most important thing. But the other important thing is I've found when dealing with these sorts of people is that I sort of argue that we as a society have to now accept these people with difficulties, whether they be the people that I'm dealing with directly or whether they be younger people that have just got some issues with their life, is that we have to try and understand why they're there. We have to not necessarily be judgmental. But the other thing is, when you look at a person like this, and I do, and I find this all the time, especially a person with autism, the general judgment is, what's wrong with them? They're silly. They're doing stupid. Or you go into a supermarket where there's a child screaming, you'll make a judgment that that parent is naughty. does not give enough discipline. That's not necessarily the case. That child may have an issue. So what we've got to do is, as a society, we have to understand, because these people now are in our society.
Yeah.
We don't institutionalize them. We put them into our society. So therefore, we have to accept they're part of our society, and we as the community have to try and do what we can to assist them and to assist others and to assist the community at large, because that's now part of our community. They are there. Let's accept them and let's try and work with them with their difficulties.
What you said there is understand, and I believe there was someone once wise, that's my Yoda speak for you, that said, seek to understand first. Is that part of what you're talking about, taking that time to just step back and rather than make a judgment up front, just have a listen and ask questions and just try and understand what's going on? Is that how can people do that more?
Well, and I was one of those persons that was in that. Look, I've been in the commercial world. I've been in big business. I've been in community type activities. I've been in it all, and I thought I knew everything. There wasn't too much more I could learn. But it wasn't until I got involved in this sort of area that I then fully realised there's another world out there. There's another immense knowledge that we have to develop, and each individual, no matter how old or how wise they think they are, they can still learn a lot and still then put that into an application that is assisting somebody in our community.
Does that fall into the category of the more I learn, the more I realise I don't know?
Absolutely. And that's something that I have found. And I've got a grandson that's autistic, but he's a high functioning in the autistic field. And look, I suppose I would have said initially, as someone in the community, look at that parent out there, got no idea how to handle their child. But it's not until you get involved with this particular child or get involved with anyone with this sort of attitude, position, that you realise that, they are a personality.
Yeah.
And some of them, look, I've got a couple of that I work with that have got brilliant personalities. They're lovable people.
Yeah.
They're willing to embrace you. We've got to do the same.
Yeah. So from that, with that embracing that, is that letting go of prejudice?
Absolutely.
How do you do that? Because people's beliefs, people will hold on to their beliefs. They'll fight for their beliefs, even when they're shown evidence that their beliefs are completely wrong.
Yeah.
People will fight for that. How does someone let go of those beliefs and let go of that prejudice?
It's difficult, and I still have a lot of discussion with people who have certain prejudices and certain beliefs, and therefore they're making judgment on the basis of what they see. All I can say is somehow, some way, step back and just look, what characteristics what positive characteristics does that person have? How can we communicate with that person in a more beneficial way than just screaming at them? And look, it happens a lot. People will scream at somebody because they're in the road, or they don't know what they're doing, or they're a fool, they're an idiot, et cetera, et cetera. No, look, irrespective, don't make that sort of judgment. Don't be prejudiced towards anyone that may have a disability, anyone that may have colour, religion, whatever it may be. Accept them for what they are. They're a human being, and allow them to be part of our community.
Because today, when we look at today's society, I think it's very polarizing out there.
It is.
And and particularly too, you have the cancel culture as well, where if someone doesn't agree with the opinion that someone else might have put forward, they say, "Oh, we've got to cancel them." Is that going to the extreme of the opposite, or embracing that prejudice, as opposed to going, we live in a liberal democracy. We can have different points of view, and that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we have to accept that. And as I was saying, with those that are in the disability area, they are different. I can't do anything about that. We can't do anything about that. They can't do anything about that. But let's accept them for what they are. Let's look at some of the more positive characteristics of an individual. But yeah, people in general, I think, they make it. They're very judgmental in when they see the certain things that a person may say or the person may do. But look, step back. Just sort of say, well, maybe I've got an issue. Maybe it's me. that's got the
I'm
problem.
offended. I think there's something in that.
And that we can do something to change people. Look, it's not an easy process. I'm dealing with some clients that, look, I'm going to have to work with them for 4 and 5 and 6 months before I can even get them to talk, before I can even get them to communicate. Now, I can't sit there and say, what an idiot, for Christ's sake, well, talk to me.
Yeah.
But you've just got to understand that they've got these issues within themselves. They've got these mental issues. And you speak to some people and, so some of the impact on their life goes back to their very, very early childhood.
Yeah.
The way they were treated, the things that happened to them. Well, look, we've all been through these sorts of things, but not necessarily to the degree that some of those have. But let's now try and see how we approach those problems as adults and see how we can then communicate back to that other individual, the one with the issue, and sort of saying, well, look, this is the way we may have done it, or this is the way, have you ever done it this way, or have you ever done it that way? Try and get them to look at themselves, but don't necessarily look at themselves in a total negative way. Look at themselves in a way that sort of says, I'm useless. Because in my opinion, irrespective, and I know there's a lot of crime out there, there's a lot of other issues out there, there's family violence, etc., etc., etc. But somehow as a community, we've got to now address this. And it is only we, the community, through our governments, that can really change this. It's our values that we've got to try and do. And I suppose you look at your own life, and I would put my own life as not a normal Australian, I suppose, because I came from a migrant background. My mother was English. My father was born in Sri Lanka, but of English and Italian descent. So I got Italian, English, and I got a few other things. But that's what makes me, in my opinion, something that's a little bit different to others. But as a result of that, I feel as though I can give in different ways. There are other people that have been through different situations in life, and I think they can also add in some way. But it is the community and it is the divergence of our community out there, really, that we've got to rely on to make sure that our community does go in the right direction. But our community can only go in that direction if it's supported and if we are supporting it, but also if governments are responding to our needs. And sadly, this doesn't appear to happen from time to time.
Yeah, well, we go through phases as well. And I think that's where you come into that strong leadership, weak leadership phase of what we have in society, and whether the people are strongly leading the government, which is the way it should be, as opposed to the government leading the people. The government needs to enact what the people want, especially, again, in a liberal democracy. We want to do that. Is respect those ideas. But it's interesting that you mentioned about that diversity. You have a diverse culture within yourself. And I know from my travels around the world, when I've traveled and met people, I found that we all fundamentally really have the same fundamental desires. We want to enjoy life. We want good things for our kids. How much of that do we think we need to step back from the minutiae and the minor details and actually look beyond and go, well, actually, that's another human being that actually wants good things for their family too?
Yeah. Well, I've one that's travelled the world as well in my business, and we've been to places like America. I've been into Europe, but also I've been to the other extreme, into the Philippines, into Indonesia, and just seen the other extremes. And again, I don't think we as a society fully appreciate how well we are off here in Australia. We don't really understand how difficult it is for life in other countries. And then you go to those other countries, and I can always remember in the Philippines and in Indonesia and Malaysia and all those sorts of things, there was such a class of people that were down at the bottom, and there was this other class up here. Unfortunately, I think what's happening, we in Australia, and whenever I used to travel the world and come back, I'd say, bloody hell, we've got a great country here. But I'm starting to hesitate a little bit of recent times, in that we seem to be not necessarily still up there, still going in the right direction. We are getting this imbalance occurring more and more with people that are suffering greatly, people that don't have the same resources. And as I said, when I'm in the disability area, you speak to these people. And I spoke to one guy this morning and I said, "What are you going to do?" He says, "Well, I can't do much. I don't have any money." And I said, "Well, you don't have any money." And then I had another guy that I had to take shopping. We went out and he wanted to buy a drink. And he said, "I want to buy a drink." I said, "Yeah. Now, we've got to make sure that we don't throw our money at him and try and think." I said, "Well, how much money?" He says, "I've got $2. I said, "You can't buy anything for $2.
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, you'll have to wait till lunchtime and then we'll buy a drink, because as we go, we buy them a drink." But there are people out there that basically don't have a cent to their name.
Yeah.
And you just go, and I think you said you lived in Maui or down there. Have you been through Maui of recent times and seen the people that are sleeping rough? There are people down there.
Yeah.
They're sleeping on the freeway in tents.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of that around the world at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this is where I wonder, because we talk about the poverty trap, and which is well documented. And you mentioned about encouraging people, and is it better to give someone a fish or teach them to fish? And because the poverty trap is very real, and I wonder about whether that's being used by people as they're either ignorant of it, because they're just sitting there giving handouts without thinking. And it's not to say you shouldn't help people. Definitely you should help people, but it's not whether you're helping people, it's how you're helping people.
Absolutely.
And that's where, and I also wonder, there's two components to that, whether it's either ignorance or because the poverty trap can be used as a form of control as well, because it becomes, "Here, I'll help you. I can help you now." And then you're training them that they can't do it themselves. And then they become reliant on you, which is a form of how dictators assume power.
Absolutely. And you are correct there, and the analogy you use there about teaching them how to fish is definitely by far the benefit of to them as an individual, not just always giving them a handout. Although I have to say that I've seen people that they need a handout. They need something to be put. And actually, it was on Sunday, I was doing the barbecue at the big hardware store. I won't mention who they are.
No branding here. Unless they're going to support the station, support your community station by
Absolutely. And if I'd give them a free plug, I'd like to think they would. But we were doing a barbecue, and one of the ladies that was helping me, and it was a men's shed barbecue that we were running there, the typical sausage sizzle.
Yep.
And she said to me, she said, "I'm just going to go for a few minutes." I said, "Why?" Because we were busy. She said, "That guy over there is picking food out of the bin." And that was at Mid-Valley.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Yeah, he's picking food out of the bin." I said, "Well, take him a couple of sausages." She said, "Oh, you sure?" I said, "Of course. Take him." I said, "Well, what were you going to do?" She said, "I'm going to go and buy him a Subway." So she took the 2 sausages. Yeah. She went to find him, but he'd gone. So she asked one of the security people there, where's this person? And he said, "Oh, he's left, but he comes here every day."
Yeah.
Just to rummage through the bins. Now, when people have reached that stage, what are we saying about our society? To me, we should be not necessarily looking at that person that's taken their food out of the tin. We should be looking at ourselves. Governments should be looking at it themselves and sort of saying, how can we better service, but not necessarily just give them handouts all the time. How do we better provide for them in other ways? And with the disability issue that we look at, we try and take them, and my idea is you try and take them around to different businesses just to see how a business operates. Now, some of these people will never be able to work, right? But at least they get a better appreciation of what other people in the community are doing, and therefore, hopefully, those people in the community will have a better appreciation of the disability people. So it's a two-way street.
And that's when you're talking about the government making it work. I mean, have we lost a bit of faith in the government? Because when you look at things now, you see reports coming out, and the information age that we live in, people can very quickly look through data and analyze it and work it out. So you see the reports come out, and then very quickly someone's gone, but that's not correct. That's not right. And it's in your own report. I mean, the recent Gen Cost report from the government, and I'm not advocating either side of where energy should come from, but when the CSIRO says, we don't know what we're talking about, so we've gone to get some consultants, and it's found out that those consultants didn't know what they're talking about, and they got their information from the internet. So have we lost, again, this is where I come back to that leadership, have we lost faith in our leaders because our leaders are not doing that, they're sheltering it? And I've had that experience here in Latrobe Valley. where I've gone to go to a council meeting, and the compliance you've got to go through to attend a council meeting is so restrictive. So we lose faith. There's a disconnect between the people and the government. Have we gone too far that way?
I'd agree wholeheartedly. We've definitely gone too far. And I think that the amount of bureaucracy that has been set up in our society, and the way in which our bureaucrats look at particular issues, you'd have to say that they're risk adverse. They don't want to take any risk at anything. So they will bring in regulation, they will bring in documentation, they'll bring in anything they can to basically make it harder and harder for people to do things. And that is for the community to also do things, for the community to respond in a more, I suppose, humane way. But we're looking at bureaucracy and we're sort of saying, well, look, we've got to be careful of this, because if that happens, they'll sue us for here. But sometimes that person needs some sort of favourable consideration before we start taking into account all these other sorts of, I suppose, risk-adverse type things that could happen. So to my way of thinking, we've definitely got to change our attitude of bureaucrats. We've got to change our attitude of our elected representatives. They've got to be there to respond.
Can we change their attitude, or we just need new ones?
Well, I've been involved.
No, just because I've done a lot of work with character, and people, when they've got their beliefs in their character, it's very rare character will change. This is why I've hired a lot of people in the business I've been, I always hired on character, not on skill, because you can always train someone with skill, but if their character is wrong, then they're not going to be, it's unlikely that will change.
Yeah. Well, I think, and again, I've got to be careful here. I don't become too political, because I have been a political...
We're not on either side of the spectrum here.
I have been a political person, but in the end, I become an independent person of political parties. I belonged to a political party for one time for many years, but I just got so disenchanted with the whole thing that I left that. What I tend to find now is that we definitely need a change in attitude. Whether our current people can change their attitude, I'd question that. Some will, some won't. I will not make a judgment on them, but we need people there that will stand up for what the community wants.
Well, that's what I was looking at and wondering, because I remember going back in, and I'm older than I look, so I remember this. But remember, we had an issue with guns. We had the Port Arthur massacre, and after that, the Prime Minister went round, and I think we've lost how difficult that was to get the gun rules in that were brought in, and that was a real strong leadership that did that. And is that, again, that's why I'm coming back to, do we need that strong leadership that is actually going to go, this is what's morally right, this is what's right for society, go back to those values that actually drive society, that have driven society for thousands of years, and have leaders that actually do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where we have lost, I suppose you can say, a quality, a standard in our representatives. Now they're elected, but sometimes they're elected with very small majorities. The system doesn't seem to favour the minority, the smaller groups. It tends to go towards the larger groups. You only have to look at that senator recently from Western Australia, the one that crossed the floor. Look, she crossed the floor on the basis of a principle, and I respect her for that. Whether you agree with or disagree with that, you should respect her for what she's done. And to me, that's the sort of person that we need to be able to stand up to their factions, to their pressure groups, whatever it may be, and just sort of saying, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I am an ex-councillor. I've had 2 terms as an ex-councillor. One of the things that I found fairly interesting in being a councillor, I'd always say, is that a councillor was a great position to have because you were very close to the community, but it was also the biggest disadvantage. In that friends and associates who knew you would come in and sort of saying, but hold on, I want this, 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 and this. Are you willing to do this, this, this? And a lot of representatives sort of saying, oh, look, the friendship is probably more important than this and that, but they make the wrong judgments. So to my way of thinking, you've got to be true to your community. If you've been elected by your community, You have to be true to your community
Mm.
and reflect what their position is. You don't necessarily always have to agree to it, and you don't necessarily always have to vote for it, but you've got to be willing to listen to it.
Yeah.
You've got to be willing to understand it and be able to argue the case of sort of saying, well, look, you may want to go in that particular direction, but I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that you have that need or you have that reason. So
I'm loving this insight into the you've had with the council and things like that, working as a councillor. But we come back and you've mentioned community a lot. And I know when we were talking before the show started, that community is very important to you and very powerful. How much do we need to, again, re-embrace that? Because I remember you go as a kid to go to the corner lolly shop. Well, it was a lolly shop, but it was a grocery store. But for me, it was a lolly shop. Yeah. But you knew the person, and I knew the milkman. You knew all these people, and they were all looking out for each other and caring about each other. Do we think we've actually, as a society, we as the people, the citizens, we've actually started to get a little bit too much focused on ourselves and let that community go?
Yeah, I think absolutely. We've tended to become a little bit more isolated, a little bit more restricted in our outlook, and that's possibly one of the things that I sort of push rather strongly in places like Trafalgar and Yarragon, and even in Moe and all those other places, Warrigal, Druin, etc., is that the strength of the community is the community.
Yeah.
The difficulty with a lot of these communities now is that they're becoming more dormitory towns. And look, I can understand that. People basically live there. They can afford to buy a house there in those particular areas, more so than in Melbourne and that. But they then go out and they go to work. They come back, they go to work, they come back. So their whole week is spent elsewhere. They come back here, then they've got the weekend. They then have to look at their children and their activities of their children. Sometimes they can't even do that. They've got to look at some of the things they've got to do around the house. They've got to do all their shopping. But all of a sudden, the community is losing its contribution from these others. I'm involved with Rotary. As a Rotary Club of Trafalgar, we're down to about 5 or 6 members. If we don't get support, we'll disappear. In a lot of the towns, a lot of their community activity or their community groups have disappeared. You only have to look at banking.
Yeah.
What's happened? I was involved with the formation of the Trafalgar Community Bank, and it's brilliant. It's a community bank.
Well, that's what I'm wondering too, because when we look at how our body works, and I think this part of, and maybe COVID didn't help, but I think we're heading there before COVID just sort of exemplified it. But when we look at how our body works, when we actually give, we produce dopamine and serotonin in our body, which makes us not only feel better, but it actually makes us physically better.
Yeah.
And when you look at today with all the people out there that are having all these issues, these health issues, how much of that do you think is actually or in part caused by people actually going, that self-interest going, what about me? What about me? Why aren't you helping me? And it's all that interest for self sort of internal focus, as opposed to going, can you help others? And I'm going to relay this story. This happened a long time ago when I was living in Perth. I'd left the army and I was bumming around. I wasn't really doing anything. And I didn't have a job either, and I didn't have any money in the bank account, and I had $10 in my wallet. That was all I had, a $10 note. And I had an Aboriginal man come up to me in the mall. I was walking through the Perth Mall, and he said, do you have any change? And I said, no, because I didn't. And he had the $10 note. And I pulled it out, and I gave it to him. I said, have that. And he looked at it. He turned it over a few times to see that it was real. And this is going back 30-odd years ago, so $10 was a bit more money then. And then he started this, I can still remember it, this smile lit up on his face. And then he started dancing. And he went around and he was dancing all around the mall. And he went up to what I'm assuming is his girlfriend or wife or something. He's dancing, he's showing her this in front of her. And I'm just sitting there watching this. And I just felt amazing about that. Now, that was my last $10, mind you. But what was interesting is next day I got a call about a job. I went and had the interview. And I think because I felt good about myself, I performed really well in the interview and got the job straight away. How much have we forgotten that this giving component, if you're having trouble, if you actually go and help someone else, all of a sudden that makes your life better?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And that's I suppose, one of the principles I work in. Give what you can. Like even today, you sort of said, could I come up for the interview? and I was working, and I knew that I had to get back at 2 by about, well, probably 20 past 2. But I thought, no, I've got to take that little bit of extra commitment to make sure I do it. And so I did that. There's a lot of other people that, people get, as you say, even like that when I sit down here with the sausages, giving them the sausages, the woman was amazed that we were willing to give 2 sausages to a guy that was going through a bin. She said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "Why not? Surely we as a community, as a society, we can respond in just a small way." And as you said, that's a very, very small way. It gives you a better feeling. It gives you a better, I suppose, appreciation. And as a result of that, you become a better person.
Yeah.
But also, that other person you've given that little gift to, also, it may only be for a split second, or it might be for a longer period and all that. But all of a sudden, they say, "Yeah, there are good people in this world," and there are. We've got an incredible resource out there.
Is that part of the abundance mentality? Because I was talking to 2 business owners in a town here. I'm not going to say the town. They're in the same type of business. It was in the hospitality area. And one of them was, you mentioned about the sausage sizzle. They were complaining about community sausage sizzles because it was taking away from their business. And the other one, again, similar business, their business was thriving. But when I was talking to this person, and I'm not being gender neutral because I'm being woke, just don't want to identify the people.
Yeah.
The other person said, what I do is when a restaurant or cafe opens, my hope is that it's good, because the more good businesses we have, the better this community is going to be, the more people are going to come because it's got a better reputation. And the difference is that mindset. One has a scarcity mindset and a victim mentality, whereas the other one has an abundance mentality. Does that make a real difference in the people that you're dealing with, having that abundance mentality?
Yeah, I find that if you can give that little bit extra, that little bit of, I suppose, extra thought, extra thing does help.
Yeah.
It genders, and probably September of last year, we decided to open up a market at Trafalgar.
Yeah.
And it's just
Pin the posters for that. I haven't got there yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's just got to a stage now where it has engendered this sort of community spirit, people coming together, like the old times, where people will come together and they chat. Mm-hmm. And it's like with organisations like the Men's Shed. Yeah. It's the matter of bringing people together to talk, to socialise, to understand, to appreciate what people are going through. And as a result of that in itself then builds and builds and builds. And hopefully everything then and look, there will be negatives, of course, but hopefully there will be more positives than negatives that will result as a change in attitude, and you'll get this sort of, I suppose, multiplying effect that will just continue to go and go. And it does surprise me how many people out there are willing to sort of saying, "Oh, look, that guy down there is scrounging through the bins, let's help him." I found one time in Maui, I had a young guy ring me. I was at the Men's Shed. He rang up and he said, "Look," he said, "my car won't go." And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I'm down at Apex Park." I said, "What are you doing down there?" He says, "I'm down there." So I said, "I'll come down." So we went down and we got his car going. I said, "What are you doing now?" He said, "I'm sleeping here." I said, No. I can't have you sleeping here. Why don't you come around to my place? I'll give you, and he needed a shower. He needed some food. And he responded in a very positive way. He's now got some assisted housing in Maui. And, okay, he's still got issues, but hopefully he understands that there are people out there willing to help him.
I found that a lot of people that I've in that similar situation where you go and speak to them and help them, they've actually got a lot of things. They've just, again, that comes back to what I'm talking about before, or what we were talking about before, was that hope. They've lost hope. They've lost the belief in themselves, and therefore, they can't see that. But if you actually, again, come back to, rather than fishing for them, giving them a fish, not saying, again, help them,
Yeah.
but in the way you help them, letting them know that there is hope, that they have that ability to actually do things.
Yeah, you do. You've got to be able to get people to understand that it's not, and again, it's hard, I suppose, but it's not life's not hopeless. Life does have, as long as you're breathing, as long as you're being able to get up
There's
in the
always
morning,
something,
and I suppose from a personal point of view, okay, I live in a house that I'm buying. I feel comfortable. I'm warm. I can feed myself, and then I think there are other people out there that can't do that.
Mm.
How do they feel? And as I said, I had this young gentleman come and spend probably a week at my place while he got himself through that. And he seems to have put himself on the right track, but only time will tell. But there are so many other people that maybe in a little way we can help as a community and just giving to these people in a way that sort of says, look, we don't expect anything back, but, look after yourself.
Well, that's where, and giving back and helping. And you mentioned before that I called you last minute to come to the show, and I do really appreciate you making that call, because I do have to give a shout out, because you mentioned about the community market.
Yeah.
My guest today was going to be Jan Fitt from the Glengarry market, and she's got a bit sick and not able to come in. So we give a shout out to the Glengarry market as well. And Jan, I hope you're recovering very well if you're listening. But and that what you've done is just gone, I'll give that a go. And we're having a wonderful conversation here. You look like you're having a good time. And this is where, again, I want to come back to that whole point of when you actually put yourself out there and help someone else and create that community that you're talking about, engage with the community. It's kind of selfish in a way, because you are helping yourself in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah. And I suppose I look at myself and I say, why do I do all these things? And I suppose I have a character that says I enjoy doing them. So therefore I'm meeting my own mental needs. I like the recognition when I go down the street because of the things I've done, and people say, oh, there you go there, Fozzie. Or they call me Fozzie Bear. How you going there? And I say, sometimes I can't remember who they are. I can't remember their name, but sometimes once we get talking, I can remember who they are and why I was associated with them. But it's a great feeling. And that's what I'm saying to our community. It's a great feeling that you will get, not necessarily individually, but as a community. And there are so many things out there now, community-type activities that need now to be able to be lift in their profile, lift in their membership, for them to continue to do the good things that our community needs. And what our community needs, it needs our willingness to accept everyone within the community, irrespective of what they've done. And if they've done anything from a negative perspective, that hopefully we can change that. But give it your best shot.
Do we need to have, again, coming back to government, do we need to have people in there that actually are saying, hey, this is actually, rather than saying, it's times are tough, which they are, let's not say that they're not.
No.
But rather than just going, times are tough at all, it's all sucks, it's all hard, and it's all difficult, and can you please help? Do we need to shift that narrative as saying, here, by getting out there and doing it, by being part of the community, it's better for you and everybody else?
Yeah. Well, that I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, in that I think that we look too much at negatives. We don't look enough at the positives.
Yeah.
And like I'm involved through Rotary, and we're involved with a number of school projects or school activities where we're trying to build citizenship, where we're trying to build participation, volunteerism within people. You only have to look at, and I know I'm talking locally, the Trafalgar Fire Brigade. They have a junior brigade training program. That is our future.
Yeah. They're
the ones that we have to try and give a feeling of what our community can do, so that they can then go to the next stage. We've got another stage there, I suppose. And look, COVID really, as an issue, I think divided our country. Those for, those against. It was wrong the way it went about, or the way we went about it, whether it was the governments or community. But what really surprised me was that the alienation, some of the bitterness that crept in to people's attitude towards friends, towards brothers and sisters.
It was almost like a police state there for a while, where
it was absolutely absurd.
1984 comes to mind.
and I was in a business where people would come in and they'd say, "Oh, look, you're not allowing anyone in here," and legally I couldn't allow them because I had a coffee shop. But people that, and I had a few friends that were in the police force, and that they had to leave the police force because they wouldn't have an injection. That really created a division. And that's really something that we now have to overcome.
Is that something we need to heal from as a nation?
Oh, we need to, absolutely. Yeah. It's created such a divide in our community. And then that sort of issue then perpetuates itself in other ways in regard to, say, flu injections or whatever it may be.
But think about that from what you're talking about there, and you mentioned about this, the volunteering and helping. And I know from my son's school, when he went, at the school, was the senior students, not only did they come out and help the junior students, so they had mentoring days and it wasn't once a year, it was weekly. So the students would come in every week. The senior students would work with the junior students, but they'd also do things out in the community as well, teaching that from a young age. But that's not normal in schools, from what I understand. He went to a private school. And so, again, do we need to call on our government? Do we need to call on our council to start implementing some of these things?
Absolutely. But again, it's up to the community to make sure that the government does do that and does follow that.
We need to call them as a community.
We
need to call them or call on them as a community.
Absolutely.
And make that
I have a very positive outlook, and I know that we talk about climate change and we talk about all these other negatives of the crime rate, et cetera, but I still have a positive outlook that says we can still achieve a good outcome.
Yeah.
But it is up to us, the community, to make sure that we have the say and we have the influence on the decision makers, and that we in ourselves also contribute towards development of whatever it may be, programs, activities, et cetera, because, look, we have an incredible resource out there, and that is the community.
Yeah. So let's tell us, because we're going to wind up the show. We've gone, actually, they told me they wanted to make this show an hour, and it's been a half an hour, but we've actually nearly gone for the hour now. So we've got that in, but there was no one there that we're taking over time from. But tell us about, you're heavily involved with the men's shed, and you operate out of this beautiful building. Tell us about the men's shed and the building that you operate out of.
Yes, I am involved. I'm the secretary of it's now called the Newborough and Yallourn Men's Shed, which is operating out of the old administration building of the SEC. It's the last remaining, sorry about that.
It's all right.
It's the last remaining remnants of the Sir John Monash development in the brown coal industry. The power station that was there has been obliterated. I think all other buildings have been obliterated. This is the only building that remains. It was used as the office for the SEC during a period of time after the development of the SEC in general. And it served a very important role within the SEC, even into the latter part of the SEC's existence. The building itself was built in 2023, October 2023, so it's over 100 years old.
Yeah. You mean 1923?
Oh, sorry, 1923. What did I say, 2000? Yeah, 1923. Right. So it was 100 years old in 2023. It's heritage listed.
Yeah.
There is stories about it, and it's quite interesting to go through the stories. We can go upstairs. It's a 2-story building. We can see the old Sir John Monash office where supposedly it was. Then you go downstairs. There's a vault downstairs, right down below ground, and there was then a tunnel access from the vault to the river, to the Latrobe River.
Yeah.
During World War II, it was considered a target that the Japanese may pit.
Yeah.
Which I've never been able to find out any accuracy. I'm told that there were some gun turrets up there on the roof, but I don't really know whether that was the case. So it's then, unfortunately, as with a lot of buildings, and look, I spent 8 years at Old Gippsland managing that. people don't appreciate our heritage. People don't appreciate what has gone before.
And what it means as well, because especially this region, that's where I think part of what we need to bring back is that a lot of the development that we have, the medical development, all these things that create the life that we have is because of today, because of Latrobe Valley providing the electricity that enabled that.
Yeah. I think that, again, the Latrobe Valley is not necessarily recognised at the level that it should be in regard to its contribution over the past 150 years. Without the Latrobe Valley, you would not have had the development in Victoria. And we know that for a fact that the development in Victoria as an industrial state was as a result of the cheap electricity. Rightly or wrongly, whether it was good or bad the way they were producing it, it built the state. And to me, the state is indebted to the Latrobe Valley. That's not recognised anymore. We're talking about all these other things that they want to do in regard to power generation. But they should be looking at the way in which the Latrobe Valley now should be able to be developed for the betterment of the state again, and whatever it may be, I don't know, but also for the development of the Latrobe Valley. To me, the Latrobe Valley, and for the time that I've been in Gippsland, has a lot to offer and has done a lot in the past. And that's the reason why I think that when we look at the SEC, and a lot of people, and I was probably one of the to criticise the SEC as such, but not until I got a little bit more involved in a lot of the people that were involved in the SEC that I appreciated what the SEC did in regard to its training, in regard to its employment of people, the way in which it built the community around here. It made the community a prosperous community. And I don't think that was ever recognised. All they seemed to look at was the SEC and the cost of power and the pollution of all this, but not necessarily all the other benefits that it gave. And that goes back even with the gas and fuel and the Board of Works and all those other bodies of government bodies and what they did for us. What do we have now? Nothing.
Yeah, we've lost a lot of that.
We've lost a lot of that.
It has been wonderful chatting with you. I love those points that you just brought up. I'd love to talk some more about that because there is so much there. But thank you for taking the time to being on Business, Wealth and Mental Health. You're very wise. It's been very wonderful having you talk about these things, and we do need to bring more attention to that.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much indeed.